Are you ready, team? Time for a couple of months of accidentally writing 2022 instead of 2023 on pretty much everything. Or if you're me, sometimes you just accidentally still write 2020 because you're not over it. Or maybe you actually have your stuff together and you know what the date is. But anywho, we are setting up for January 2023 in my new bullet journal, which is always kind of exciting, but also feels kind of stressful. This is the first monthly setup that we have in this journal, and I always want to make it good, but usually around December, I'm setting up quite a few bullet journals, whether they be for myself or for others, so when it actually comes to doing the monthly setup, I'm already starting to feel just a little bit burnt out creatively. Thankfully, I've decided to make the creativity aspect of my monthly setups a little bit easier in 2023, in that I have gone with a year-long theme. Now, you may have seen my video on year-long themes, and one of those ideas in particular was having themes centered around national holidays, or in particular, novel national holidays. This is the yearly theme that I have decided to go for, so each of my monthly themes in my bullet journals for 2023 are going to be centered around holidays that are a little bit outside of the usual. So not Christmas and Valentine's Day and St. Patrick's Day kind of thing, but things like Rubber Duck Day, which is what we've gone for January. I'm very excited about this because you may have seen that in my stationery pal haul I got a little rubber duck as a bonus thing, and I'm not usually a mega fan of the bonuses that they put in the boxes. Like, I think that they're cute and probably quite nice for some people, but I don't really like clutter, so I don't typically keep them. Not really a knick-knack kind of person. But this little rubber duck was just too cute to part with, so he is living in our bathroom now. And in putting Rubber Duck Day on the poll, I knew in my soul that it was going to win. Some of the other theme ideas we had were things like Puzzle Day or Pizza Week, stuff like that. But Rubber Ducky Day, that is the one that won. For my actual rubber duck decoration though, I've gone pretty simple. We just have the same style of rubber duck drawn on all of the different spreads, just facing in different directions. So whether it's facing to the left or to the right, and then rotating the rubber duck a little to give some visual interest. These rubber ducks actually started their life on a scrap piece of paper where I was practicing drawing the rubber ducks before actually putting them into my journal, just so that I could get the shape right. But one of the ones I drew I thought was super cute, and I didn't want to have to try and draw it again, so I actually just ended up using the sketch and tracing it into my journal. We've talked about the tracing trick before. There is a link in the description to a video where we go into some detail on that, along with links to all of the equipment that I used and any other relevant videos. The spread we're working on here though is going to contain my projects list for the month on the left-hand page, and on the right we'll just have a cover page for January. My projects list I found really helpful since I started using it earlier in the year. Previously I was just using that left-hand page for a quote, but I never really came back to this spread, so I didn't get to appreciate the quote or my cover page. But with my projects list, because this is something that I refer back to often, it means I get to come back and appreciate my cover page. It also just makes the spread as a whole a little bit more functional. For the headers on both pages, I've done a cursive style calligraphy on a blue memo note. I thought that the plaid pattern was nice and it kind of tied in with my starter journal setup where I also did a plaid theme. I wanted to incorporate more blue into the layout so that I didn't just have the yellow that I ended up using on the rubber ducks. As part of the planning process for organising my monthly setups, I like to swatch out my pens and decide on my materials ahead of time, just so that I can make sure that they all get good use throughout the pages of the setup, and to make sure that they all work together cohesively. While I probably would have liked a better match between the Tombow that I chose and the memo note, I still thought that the colour palette as a whole was kind of cute. You'll have seen that on that planning page, along with the colour palette, we also have things like general aesthetic notes, quote quote, or more like styles of decoration or elements that I want to include. I also put in a place to map out what spreads I'm going to want to include in the setup, just so I have a checklist as I'm sketching out the pages to make sure I don't miss anything. And then also a place to put in what lettering style that I want to use. So for these setups, it's going to be a combination of that lettering with the Tombow Fudenosuke for the headers, and then also just a simple all caps font for any subheaders. In terms of timing, from first touch of the pen to final erasings, these two pages combined took about 14 minutes, but that doesn't include idea generation time or sketching in time. Technically speaking, when we get to the point of flipping over to the next spread, the page on the left isn't actually quite finished, just because I'm not actually too sure how many lines I need for each of my sections. You can see I have written in the header for JashiiCorrin YouTube, so here, and also for Patreon, and while the Patreon one probably has the right number of lines, I'm not too sure how many lines I need for video content next month. So I might have to add in some additional lines before I write in another subheader underneath that section for my other YouTube channel, and also probably another category for home tasks as well. Flipping on over though, and we are getting into the monthly log. With the monthly log comes many more duck doodles, which, as mentioned, were all traced in. That's why they all have the same duck dimensions. But each of those were drawn in with the same Tombow Fudenosuke brush pen that I used for the lettering of my headers. I kind of like that it gives you an uneven line thickness depending on the amount of pressure you apply, which is nice in that it makes wobbly lines or uneven lines look kind of intentional, or at least not bad, if that kind of makes sense. If I was trying to go in with a micron, for instance, and wanting to get a very even weight or thickness to my lines, any time that I put a line in the wrong place and have to go back over it to smooth it out or something like that, that space would end up looking a little bit strange. The nice part about the pen I decided to use is that it intentionally has the uneven thickness, which means if I do have to go over a space or thicken it up a little bit because the line started going off in a direction it wasn't supposed to, it just doesn't look as bad. I don't really know if that makes sense, hopefully it does. The general gist though is that I enjoyed drawing with this pen. Along with our little duck decorations, another repeated decorative element that I'm using on all of the layouts in this setup are the little circles, or what I'm effectively using as bubbles. Rubber ducks are very much associated with bath time, so I thought some bubbles would be cute to kind of make it like a little rubber duck bubble bath, without having to actually draw baths in. While I could have just gone in and drawn those circles myself, possibly using a Tombow dual brush marker or something like that, I really just wanted to use a dot marker because they're so much faster, they're very convenient. This did introduce another colour into my colour palette. I couldn't really find a blue dot marker that truly matched the blue that I was using in terms of my Tombows, but as said, even though it's not perfect, I do like how the colour palette turned out. In terms of the headers for each of the days of the week, you may have seen that I initially had some little bubbles sketched out in pencil, but because I wanted all the pages to tie together in terms of like the lettering and header style, I decided instead to cut out some little squares of that plaid memo pad. They were certainly fiddly, but I think that it just helps to tie in the monthly log with the rest of the pages of the setup, just keeping that consistency in my header style. In terms of timing, the monthly log took about 22 minutes from first touch of the pen to final erasings, but flipping on over, we're going to be getting into my action steps list and my habit tracker, though first we're just going to have a look at how December is going. If you've been here a while, you know that I like to show the previous month in my monthly setups, just because I think that there's value in showing the after the pen layouts. It's kind of good to see how things actually got filled in. For December we went with an advent calendar / Christmas village theme, so a whole bunch of tip-ins that I could put little memories from each day behind, and the decoration was made super simple by using stickers from the washi tape shop. Although my actual use of the journal has been kind of varied, mainly because when I get busy, I tend to neglect my journal, which is not necessarily the best habit, and probably something that I want to tackle in the new year. So because we have had some busyness in December, certain days aren't looking too populated. We also haven't finished December. At the time of recording this, I'm only about halfway through the month, so still got some pages to fill out. This journal only had 2 spreads left in the back though, and that's why we have started a new journal for the new year, along with the fact that I do just like to start a new journal with a new year. It's that very much fresh slate feeling. The only time that I haven't started a new journal in January would be my first bullet journal, because I first started bullet journaling in November, so it felt a little bit silly to have an entirely new journal when I'd barely used the one that I was in. Working on this spread though, on the left hand side I have my actions list space, so where I can write in the different steps that I need to do to work on my goals, and then on the right hand page this is going to be for habit tracking. At this stage I'm not too sure how much space I need for both my habits and my action steps. I'm not too sure how many one-off or monthly actions I'll have versus weekly actions versus daily actions, and I haven't at this stage planned how many habits I want to track. So this is going to be another one that by the time that we flip on to the next page, it's not quite finished. I still have to go and put in some blue lines. In terms of the structure of those pages though, the actions list is going to be separated into 3 sections. So as mentioned, the one-off and monthly tasks, the weekly tasks, and the daily tasks. And the habit tracker is set up in a vertical style, so we have the numbers for each of the days of the month down the side, and then each column beside that is going to hold one habit that I can then tick off for each of those days. The idea behind putting my actions list and my habit tracker on the same page is so that I can more easily track those daily actions. Rather than having the daily actions put on the actions list, I'm instead going to incorporate those into my habit tracker. Because at this stage I haven't quite finished my goal setting, and thus don't quite have my full list of action steps identified, I just put in a few blue lines for the monthly actions, and then also some vertical lines on the habit tracker for the habits that I'm going to be tracking. If you do have any questions about these pages though, please do feel free to leave them in the comments. I would be more than happy to chat with you about them. In terms of timing though, from first touch of the pen to final erasings, this spread took about 8 minutes, and then we're flipping on over to what is a new tracker for me, and this is a self-care tracker. This is going to encompass all types of self-care that I value, so both physical things and mental things, and it's effectively a cross between what my actions list is going to be and my habit tracker. So it'll have a space to track daily things that I want to do for my self-care, but also have spaces for weekly things and monthly things that I need to do. Rather than combining it with the stuff on the last spread, I wanted to have this one separate so that I could very clearly see which of the tasks are or aren't getting done, and if there are any trends between those things. For January, it's probably going to be less about trying to hold myself to getting every single thing on the list checked off, and more as a way to gain more information about my habits regarding my self-care tasks. Which things am I doing fairly consistently? Which things do I typically do at the start of the week, but by midweek and then towards the end, they just stop getting done? I think habit tracking on a monthly basis, like I've got in this setup, is going to be really helpful to identify those patterns. While putting my trackers on my weekly logs was also helpful in the sense that they were always right in front of my face and thus were more likely to get filled in, it did make it a little bit more challenging to identify those patterns. On the right hand side of the spread though, the top section is for my book club tracking. So our book club book for the month ahead has been selected. We're going to be reading Heartless by Marissa Meyer. This one has 54 chapters, so I've put 54 little dots in that section that I can tick off as I read those chapters. The space at the bottom is just a place for notes. They're not necessarily going to be notes about the book, though I might end up using it that way, but it could just be for notes in general, so I've just titled it Notes and Musings. This full spread took about 14 minutes to set up, so that includes both pages, the decoration, the header making, but it doesn't include sketching in time or idea generation. Turning over, and we're setting up another spread that I have not had in my journal for a while, but this is a social media scheduler for Instagram in particular. I'm not gonna lie, I'm absolutely terrible at making sure that I'm posting on Instagram, and I'd like to rectify that next year. One of the big things about my content in general is that I like sharing bullet journal ideas. Obviously, video format is really good for that. I can give you more in-depth explanations where I can talk and point and stuff like that. But it's also really valuable to have stagnant images of the ideas too, and that's kind of what I want to use Instagram for. I know there's a big push to do reels, but I'm an old lady and I couldn't be bothered. I'm sure in the new year I will do more reels. I'm not very good at short form content yet, and I'd like to practice it more, but it's just not a priority right now. But I would like at least to make Instagram more of a priority. So even if it's just still images, I would like to post there more often. I have been doing a very good job of it in the past few months though, so posting between 1 to 3 times a day, and thus the 3 columns that I've set up on the left here for those 3 possible posts. Any more than that and I just do not think it would be sustainable at all. Because the next layout that I wanted to include in the setup, I wanted to have over a full spread, I decided on the right hand page of this spread to include more schedules but for different platforms. So we still have 3 columns, but each of those columns is for a different space. One being for my Facebook page, one being for my Facebook group, and the other one being for our YouTube community tab. This spread took about 10 minutes to set up though, and now we're flipping on over to another 10-minute spread, and this one's going to be my monthly reflection page. I was considering putting the monthly reflection after my weekly setups, but I also know that if I don't set it up at the start of the month, there is a very high likelihood that I will get to the end of the month and just not bother. My monthly reflections are really powerful tools, so having them set up now, before the month even starts, means that I'm much more likely to 1. Do the reflection, and thus 2. Gain the insights that I get from the reflection. My reflection pages have gone through very many iterations, and I am changing it up yet again for the new year. I wanted to make sure that this one incorporated stuff that I've identified from my goal setting. For instance, a space to track my finances, spaces to record my wins, my challenges, any improvements that I want to make. I also wanted a space to identify things that are or aren't working in my bullet journal. I'm a big believer in reflection. I think it is a super powerful tool if you do it intentionally and really sift through it to get the information out and then apply that information moving forward. But you could of course use this as more of a month in review type page, so putting things like your social media stats if that's something you care about, what media did you consume, do you have any particular memories that were really enjoyable or just stood out in general. Funnily enough, another topic that I do have a video on. I need to make like a proper video catalogue. That's certainly a future me problem, but possibly could be good. Anywho, heading into our flip through though, I thought this setup was really cute. Going into it, I was kind of worried that I was going to draw out the ducks and they were all going to look a little bit odd, but I think that they turned out really cute. It actually came together a lot faster than I was expecting to, probably because we didn't do a hardcore heavy amount of decoration. Outside of the ducks, it's just the dots and then the headers on those memo pads, which is a really nice easy way to add a decorative element without a lot of effort. If you were still looking for more January bullet journal ideas, then the playlist at the top here is where it's at, or if you just wanted to see some of my previous monthly setups in general, then the one at the bottom is for you. Click or tap on either of those and I'll see you over there.